Welcome back to Practical Woodworking. Today I'm going to be making a miter sled for my table saw. A miter sled is a table saw attachment that rides along your miter slot. Its main purpose is it allows you to cut a long piece of material at an angle other than 90 degrees. I have an upcoming project. I'm going to be making a set of sawhorses, and the legs have a slight taper to them, so I need this to be able to cut that angle over the length. This makes it possible if you were to try to use your miter gauge on your table saw, you wouldn't have much luck. The body of the sled is going to be made out of MDF. The bottom piece here will be what rides along the table saw, the top of the table saw. This narrower piece will sit on top of the wider piece, and it'll be free to move at any angle. I'm going to be using T-bolts and knobs to lock in this narrow piece at the angle that I want, and then I'll be mounting these hold down clamps on top of the narrow piece, and then that way once I have my angle set, I can put my piece of wood in the sled and clamp down on these hold down clamps to hold it in place while I make my cut. All right. Next step we're going to be doing is to cut the slots in the MDF for its mobility. I'll be using a 1/4 inch end mill to cut the grooves, the initial grooves for the bolt, and then on the bottom of the wide piece I'll be cutting a 1/2 inch wide groove, probably about a 1/4 inch deep. I have the slots marked out with pencil right now. You can see on the narrow piece I have a line representing where the slot's going to go. That's going to be parallel to the blade, and these two lines are its range of motion. And then on the wide piece, the slot will be right here, stopping at the halfway point if this piece was flush on either side. So this piece is 4 inches wide. This slot's going to stop 2 inches from that edge and 2 inches from this edge. So you can see the main concept of this, the way these angles are going to work. No matter how I move this within reason, there's always going to be a spot in between both of these ranges where these lines or the slots are going to intersect, and that's where your bolt will be running through both of them and be able to clamp it down into the angle that you want. All right, I got the narrow piece clamped in right now. I'm going to be cutting the slot. I put a couple spacers underneath my workpiece. That way when I cut all the way through, I'm not cutting into the table. I also put a straight edge that is 1 3/4 inches away from your center line. That's the same as the side of your router to the center of the bit. That way it'll allow me to, 1, set my distance away, and then 2, it'll allow me to have a nice straight line. So you can see what the T slot looks like. This piece will ride right in there, and it can't turn, but it could slide back and forth. Okay, now that I have the top and bottom pieces assembled, I'm going to be gluing on the track or I'm not sure what it's called. It rides in your miter slot. This will get glued and screwed to the bottom side of your MDF. All right, let the glue set up overnight. It's still a little runny. I'm going to be scraping off the glue, drilling my pilot holes, and screwing down this track to the body of the sled. When you're mounting these tracks on the bottom of a sled, if you use a drill or a driver, the taper of the head will actually push out on these sides, and then you'll have a tight fit in your miter slot. So I like to run them in by hand so I don't over tighten them, and then squeeze out that width. All right, now I have all the screws in. I'm going to use just a cheap, I think this is a paint scraper. Just has a blade on it. I'm going to use that to clean up the glue on either side. Okay, the last thing I'm going to be doing is installing these, the hold down clamps on top of the narrow piece of the MDF. I'm going to be using bolts and nuts rather than wood screws, because I don't trust MDF will be able to hold the wood screw after repeated clamp downs. I feel it's not strong enough, and that wood screw will eventually, the threads will rip out. So I'm just going to drill a hole through this narrow piece, countersink on the bottom side, enough to allow the head to be recessed in there and not interfere when the top piece slides on the bottom. Now that the holes are drilled, I can go ahead and do the assembly on the hold down clamps to my narrow piece. I have the sled reassembled. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration on how it works. Before I do that, I'm going to have to remove the sled, bring the blade up, and get this side trued up. Right now it's just slightly over that blade. Say I wanted to rip down this piece of plywood, and I wanted this width to remain the same, and I wanted to cut an inch off on that side, so have a slight taper from this point to that corner. So you can put this in your sled. We'll line up this corner. We'll line up this edge right here, this corner with that edge. I'll lock that into place for now. And then we could slide this side over to my mark. And then we'll lock this into place. Double check our put our hold downs down, and we can bring our blade up. So you can see here how the sled, it performed exactly as it should. It put a nice straight cut at an angle along the length of the board, along the entire length of the board. The sled, for making a cut like this, it's the way to go. You would not be able to make this cut using the miter gauge that comes with your table saw. Those aren't designed for cuts like this. Miter gauges are designed for cuts along the narrow side of a board. You can change the angle, rest it up against there, and then just slide it and cut that little angle. That's what those are made for. This sled is made for the length. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be using this sled to cut the legs for sawhorses that I'll be making in my next video. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe.